Learning how to properly balance and mix the mid-range is really what separates an amateur production from a professional one. So let's first define what we mean by a muddy sounding mix. This can be a somewhat subjectively used term, but normally engineers are referring to the mid-range, or more specifically the lower mid-range, so from about 200 to 500 Hz, roughly speaking. So you know the area in general to target, but why does this one spot cause so many problems? Well, build-ups in the mid-range are very common because so many instruments that are typically used across multiple genres like bass, guitar, vocals, and so on, all have frequency overlap in that specific area, meaning that the more layers you have, the more likely you are to encounter this issue. I think the best way to start off is to first listen to a muddy sounding mix. So that to me is a pretty typical sounding muddy unprocessed mix. All the elements are there, but everything sounds undefined and lacks the clarity you'd expect to hear as a listener. The section we're going to be looking at is made up of 4 main instrument groups, those being drums, bass, rhythm guitars and lead guitars. Let's start off with the drums, as this is going to have the biggest impact on the overall sound of the mix. This is what they sound like currently without any processing. You can hear it's a decent sounding recording, it's just that there's a lot of muddy frequencies that we need to clean up to help define each kit piece so they stand out in the full mix. Starting with the kick, I was given 2 tracks for this, one is the main kick sound and the other is a sub kick. I've also added a printed kick sample, which I'll talk about in a minute. The main focus is the first kick track. A trick I like to use before applying EQ is to first listen to the sound and then describe this to myself in my head, which then often helps me figure out what EQ moves to make. So I'll let you try this for yourself by first playing the kick in solo, and then I want you to describe the sound to yourself. Let me know if you heard something similar to what I did. To me, I describe this as a boxy sounding kick. It has that basketball sounding slap to it, which I'm personally not a big fan of, and the bulk of the issues I'm hearing lie within that muddy mid-range. Bringing up my EQ, you can see what I've just described is reflected in the moves I've made. I've got this high pass filter on to remove some of the unwanted sub information. Remember, I've also got a dedicated kick subtrack too, so we don't need a great deal of this on the main kick track. Then I've got 4 cuts to the mid-range, ranging from about -2 to -5 dB, going from about 250 Hz all the way up to just under 1 kHz. There was also this weird ringing frequency that I think was coming from some of the cymbal bleed, so that's what this tight bell cut is removing, along with a high shelf boost to add in some top end. Separately from my EQ, I've also saturated the upper range of the kick using this multi-band saturator, which is helping to bring out a little more click definition. I'll play this track with and without these 2 plugins so you can hear the difference. And like I said, I also had this kick subtrack, which I didn't do too much processing to. I just filtered out most of the high end as it had this odd clicky sound that wasn't meshing well with my main kick, and then a high pass filter to remove any low end rumble. After this, I felt like the kick in general lacked weight I needed for it to punch through the mix, so I added this kick sample too. I'll play all 3 tracks together so you can hear the before and after. I'll repeat the same process as before with the snare drum, so I'll let you hear it first, try to describe the sound to yourself, and then let that inform your potential mixing decisions. To me, this was another boxy and slightly muffled sounding track. It also has this airy quality to the upper mid-range, which I didn't really like the sound of. So once again, you can see these ideas reflected in my EQ moves. I felt like the body of the snare was too thin, so this low shelf is helping to add a bit of oomph around the fundamental. The high pass is just removing some of the kick bleed, whilst these 3 cuts are targeting the areas I just mentioned. The first 2 are removing that boxy muffled sound, whilst the third cut is removing a bit of that distracting airy sound, which is coming from the cymbal bleed. For the full mix, I also sample enhanced the snare drum, as it sounded too pokey within context, but for now I'll just play you the before and after of the close mic snare. And then the last part of the drum kit that is heavily affecting the sound is coming from these 2 overhead tracks. The EQ is pretty simple here. I don't personally like having too much low end in my overheads, as I prefer to leave this for the individual close mics and or the room mics. So in this case, I've added a high pass filter to remove most of the kick sound, along with a slight dip around 680Hz and a gentle roll off around the top end to deal with those harsher frequencies in the cymbals. I'll play you the full drum mix, samples included, so you can hear the before and after. Before you go, as a producer and engineer who's tried countless options to improve my mixes, the Sage Audio membership is the only platform that actually delivers results, and it's an incredible experience. The membership includes unlimited mixing feedback, direct one-on-one mentorship, in-depth mixing and mastering courses, 50 free mastered songs per year, and a lot more. Every day I see huge wins from members noticing a massive improvement in their mixes after joining. Use a link in the description to see if the Sage Audio membership is right for you.